What a difference a day makes. The news of Switch 2 is here and it is glorious. Shuntaro Furukawa's historic announcement on social media definitely feels like a slightly more up-to-the-minute version of the famous 3DS announcement from days gone by, and yet is, if anything, masterful for being unrevelatory. This really is a case of Nintendo providing maximum sizzle for minimum steak, and I think it's fantastic. My regularly scheduled video will come out tomorrow, but I couldn't let the moment pass without at least acknowledging this historic event. So, this is just an extra quick video response to the Furukawa announcement. And I have to say, as someone who appreciates the effort the company goes to in trying to surprise and delight its fans, who enjoys the slight edge of showmanship that Nintendo at its best often brings to the table, that I can't help but admire the fact that this is literally the absolute minimum commitment to information they could reasonably give while still classing it as an announcement. It's an announcement of the plan to make an announcement about the successor. Not even an announcement of the successor, just an announcement about it. And within the fiscal year, which takes us into March, and leaves open the possibility that the actual launch date could be far later, late 2025 or beyond, although I don't think that will ultimately happen. The choice of the term successor to Nintendo Switch is a little more elegant than Switch 2, but of course absolutely expected. Is it significant that they call it a successor to the Switch rather than simply the next Nintendo console? I don't think so. In a sense, any next console will be a successor in the same way the Switch was a successor to the Wii U. I do think the next console will be a formal successor in many ways, and I do think it will use the Switch branding, but I think this statement simply reflects that the Switch is their current and only console offering. Mostly though, I think this is a case of making things nice and ambiguous to allow Nintendo a lot of scope to do everything they need to do in the utmost of secrecy for as long as possible. As I mentioned in my previous two videos, and I'm going to be deep diving in my next one, they need to get all those manufacturing agreements airtight so that when the Switch 2 goes into production, it stays in production. Additionally, they need to keep an eye on the febrile global markets and move at a time that's right for them. To me, the question I want to know, and I'm not sure if we'll ever get an answer, is does Nintendo yet know for sure when it's releasing? And if so, when will they share this? Don't misunderstand, I'm sure they have a tentative date penciled in, and at this point I think the date is likely within this fiscal year, March or even late February, although in a second I'll talk about why I think April is a date they may find really attractive. Don't forget, the 3DS launched on the 26th of February, but this announcement goes out of its way not to commit them to anything this financial year, and it prompts the question, just how up in the air is the release date still? My hunch is that while they want to keep their options open, once that train leaves the station and Switch 2 production is underway, there's not going to be a lot of wiggle room. Contracts will be signed, machinery and software will be tested, advertising budgets will be allocated, airtime will be purchased. Nintendo likes to be nimble, of course, but I think they will need to fix the date quite some time in advance. Whether they announce that date externally all that early, well, I can see arguments either way. They didn't announce the final launch date of Switch until the January of 2017, mere weeks before its release, but as anyone around for the early Switch days will remember, it was, supposedly, if not in reality, just a Zelda machine. And by the way, if there was a machine that just played Breath of the Wild, for my money, that's better than a good number of consoles that have been on the market over the years. But the point here is that third parties were bruised by the Wii U experience and biding their time with the Switch, and Nintendo had a fair degree of free rein in terms of their launch, without needing to coordinate with all that many external parties, at least in comparison to what they're going to face launching the Switch successor system. However, in this world where they have many third parties wanting to get on the ground floor of a new console, the number of potential sources of leaks increases exponentially. I don't think Nintendo overly minds if the date is the subject of widespread rumour, but they're probably not going to want to have it outright leak ahead of time if they can avoid it. For this reason though, I'm starting to see a great benefit to an April window over a March one. Switch released on 3rd of March, 3DS on the 26th of February, which were the 9th weeks of their respective launch years, or at least the end of the 8th week in the case of the 3DS. If you believe in patterns, there's certainly smart money to be put on the equivalent date in this time frame, probably a Thursday, since this seems to be their new game release date. This would put 27th of February or 6th of March as distinct possibilities, and I do think the latter has the benefit that it runs seamlessly into the Mario Day weekend, allowing for Mario Day a day they used to ignore but in recent years have been cultivating to be a fulcrum for promoting their new console. But if they commit to this fiscal year, they are committing to a very hard deadline. Having March as a fixed deadline gives them zero wiggle room. If they need to move the date, it's not just a move, it's a delay. Whereas committing to early in the next fiscal year doesn't preclude them from releasing it early. The 3rd of April is a Thursday, should they wish, and will be part of the new financial year in Japan, which always ends on the 31st of March, although not in the rest of the world. They also have an ace up their sleeves, which is to move the release forward if things are going to plan. They have done this rarely before, notably in moving Xenoblade Chronicles 3 up from September 2022 to July 2022, although this was really part of an exchange that saw Splatoon 3 pushed back, so it's not quite the same thing. All things considered, I'm not sure the pyrotechnics of bringing forward a console launch would be worth it for them, and such stunts have a fairly patchy history. I am an absolutely huge fan of the Sega Saturn, and I genuinely think it's the most underrated console ever by a massive margin, brimming with absolute classic games. But if Sega had their time again, I really don't think they'd have wanted to repeat going in July 1995 at a time when they struggled to ship enough units to stores, while allowing Sony to undercut them massively on price and release mere weeks later. Nintendo doesn't have direct competitors in quite the same way, but with a PlayStation 5 Pro and potentially more entries in the portable PC space hovering into view around the holidays, a period of watchful waiting might prove advantageous to them before they commit to manufacture. I'm going to save an actual forecast for the time being, as there are so many considerations at play with the next system's release date, and I'll cycle round to these soon. Incidentally, although Furukawa's is a remarkably bare-bones statement, he does add an interesting bit of mood music when he says, "It will have been over 9 years since we announced the existence of Nintendo Switch back in March 2015. Nintendo's sense of occasion can be a little spotty. I have a video coming up about how they treat events, anniversaries and so forth, but they're notoriously inconsistent. Generally speaking, the anniversary of a console is not something you really want to harp on about. If you're highlighting the age of a current console, it just makes people think of it as potentially dated. If you're talking about a prior console, well, that's great, but that console isn't on sale any longer, so it's kind of dead advertising time. Therefore, I think it's interesting and noteworthy that he chose to directly acknowledge the length of time it's been. What does this convey? 1. Simply that they do want to build up a sense of excitement and occasion around the reveal of the Switch Successor system, despite it being such a long time in the waiting. Secondly, I think they are desperate to do a victory lap for Switch and actually celebrate how successful it's been for them and what a long and glorious ride it's had. Announcing the next system's existence in concept, if not yet in actuality, almost allows them to uncork that excitement, and I wouldn't be surprised if the back half of the year constitutes now a kind of victory lap for the console as they pivot to showing what a historic and significant system it has been, and encourage the massive install base to really relish every highlight of the game library. After all, if strategy A was to put your fingers in your ears and sing really loudly to pretend the next console isn't coming, that strategy is now off the table. So strategy B has to be to find a way to show that the Switch is still an incredible proposition, even if it is at the very end of its life. Of course, alongside this announcement, there was also the sweetener of a June Direct. This was the last point they could probably plausibly host a Direct without hitting a black hole games vacuum. I already have a video reviewing the likelihoods for a future Direct, and I'll pop a link to that video at the end. Incidentally, I saw a couple of tongue-in-cheek comments suggesting that the recent fuss about the governance report wording had actually bounced Nintendo into action. As we saw in the previous video, if a revelation was disclosed, even by mistake, then it's incumbent on the company to act. And while I don't know if the document itself was an issue, the wording would have been thoroughly vetted by Nintendo after all, it probably didn't help that a robot on Twitter decided to get the wrong end of the stick and broadcast news of a forthcoming announcement completely wrongly, or at least completely wrongly as far as it was aware. Nintendo is resistant to being bounced into things, and they're pretty stubborn, but equally it's a bad look if there's even the perception that information has been shared with some people and not others, so the announcement was probably a canny move regardless. Having said that, there was always a significant chance that an announcement would be made, and I for one am pleased to hear a bit of a roadmap for when we will learn more. Take care and see you tomorrow for another Nintendo Forecast.